our ability to do these jobs with far less disruption and to provide a long-term protection. Those are two unusual components of what we do in our value proposition. We also do it faster than the current protocols, and we do it for less money.
Welcome to Biz Stories Shared, where storytellers share their inspiration, motivation, some disappointments, and how they applied the lessons that led them to success. Stories are gifts. Listen as these gifts are shared. Now, here is your host, Charlotte Plott.
Hello, storytellers. This is Charlotte Plott, and I'm thrilled to bring you our guest today, Michael Himelfarb. Michael, are you ready to be a storyteller?
Oh, absolutely.
Great. Well, Michael Himelfarb is the founder of numerous entities, including GPS Inc., which is Global Prevention Services Inc. Michael has an extensive background in creating, developing, and managing emerging companies. From international trade to electronics distribution to vehicle manufacturing to government contracting for the Department of Defense, Michael's career has been a combination of creative and strategic thinking and action. As president of a regional general construction company, Michael was exposed to mold remediation projects and immediately recognized the need for a more positive, proactive approach. His founding of GPS Inc. is primarily the result of his desire to mitigate the health risks to those so seriously affected by mold infestations and secondarily to minimize the destruction and eventual unbridled cost to prepare and remediate unnecessary building damages. Michael, I've given our listeners just a little summary about you, so will you please take a minute and tell us more about you personally, because we want to get to know you better, and then give us an overview of your business.
Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell the story. I have a very long background in business that began in the 70s when my father passed away, and I took over our family business, which was the first music and record stores in the state of Arizona, and grew up around musicians and art and just a fantastic series of talented people. I also had to grow up pretty fast because the business was in bad shape and needed to be turned around. So I have a long history of dealing with people in a way that is proactive and innovative and educational, capitalizing on the best talents of other people. And I have been very blessed to have had some extremely wonderful people around me in my various businesses. The music business led me into international trade, as strange as that may seem. And I had a long, almost 20-year career in dealing with significant principal partners around the world in various commodities. And obviously, you learn a lot of lessons about the world, global economy, cultures, and the different styles of doing business from that experience. And that has led me to so many other fantastic opportunities. I'm very pleased to just mention that I was the gentleman behind the first ever privatization contract with the United States government, where the government actually solicited for and we won a contract to take over all the surplus assets of the Department of Defense.
Wow.
Extremely short sentence, an extremely giant concept and operation. And I was with that company until my retirement in 2002. It's in retirement that I came across the situation with mold and how it was dealt with by the professionals and non-professionals in that industry. And as president of a construction company, we ran into 5 specific mold issues, very large issues: international airport, federal government buildings, courthouses, really an amazing assortment of high-level projects that all had mold in them. And we didn't do mold, so I actually hired mold contractors. And I'm in this industry today because we had an unbelievable experience with 100% failure. The projects got more expensive, they got more outlandish in terms of time and excuses. And ultimately, all 5 projects that I was involved in as president of the company by these subcontractors failed. And that kind of failure is just unknown to me. So I decided to do something about it. And 12 years later, I'm in this business and we're making significant improvement in the way the ultimate consumer, whether it's commercial or residential, receives these services, receives the best possible results. And in the meantime, we're doing it in a very green, non-disruptive, and far less costly way. So I'm very proud of what we do.
I don't blame you for being proud of what you do. And I was amazed when I read on Wikipedia about mold growth and remediation. I've heard of black mold. In fact, I think I had it in a closet in an apartment a long time ago. And from what I've read, are there dangers as serious as asbestos from mold?
Easily as serious as asbestos. We are asbestos contractors as well, so we know that arena completely. The the issues with mold have really not come to the forefront because there haven't been good answers and there really hasn't been a methodology to determine which molds and how much of those molds are truly damaging to humans. But anyone who's had a significant mold problem can tell you how it's affected themselves, their family, their pets, their plants, and visitors. The reality is there are diseases named after molds. So I think it's
Really?
pretty clear that we have a very significant problem. I don't want to go too deep into this, and I don't want to scare people because the vast majority of molds are not damaging to human health, except in the most extreme cases of growth. But there are a number of molds that are, in fact, quite dangerous to humans and other living organisms. And this is a man-made problem. Mold has been around since the dawn of time, and we need molds. Molds are a good thing for the environment in which we live. We just don't want to capture those molds in our living, working, and educational spaces and have them colonize and grow extensively in areas that we're going to spend great deals of time. So that is a recent, let's say, 30 or 40-year trend in mankind's movement to build buildings that are energy efficient, to build, so to speak, airtight buildings. So in the 50s and 60s and before, our buildings would breathe and fresh air would be utilized in and out of those buildings. But with energy efficiency, we wanted to stop that transfer of cool air in Phoenix leaving the building in the summer or warm air in the winter leaving a building, let's say in Minnesota. So mankind decided through its building practices to build basically what turned out to be incubators for mold and other organisms.
Wow.
So we didn't have this problem. At least I'm old enough to tell you we didn't have this problem when I was a child and I lived in the middle of an orchard. But today, people are having tremendous problems with mold infestations, both in their homes and their businesses and residences. Some of the worst mold issues in this country are in medical facilities, educational facilities, fire stations, for example. All of these places have daily maintenance and the use of lots of water, which
Mm-hmm.
gets trapped in these buildings. So it's a man-made problem. It's not one to be afraid of from Mother Nature.
Well, you said that you don't want to frighten us, but what should I do? Do I have a mold inspector come to my home, or what do we do?
Well, at the first sign of an issue, and if you're, let's say you're buying a home this week and you've never lived in that home prior, yeah, inspection would be very smart. But in your own home, you don't get mold growth without the specific factor of water. Let me go back for a moment. Mold is everywhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
ubiquitous. Then we have temperature. Molds grow in temperatures that exceed the temperatures that mankind survives, either cold or hot. So molds grow all over the earth in all kinds of temperature. And molds need sustenance, and that sustenance is organic or carbon-based materials. So unfortunately, humans are made out of such materials, but so are our houses, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and other living organisms. So it's molds that bring down and recycle all the organic material that's dead or decaying on Earth. So this is the purpose of mold, and it's a critical purpose. There'd be no mankind without molds. So the one factor that we found out that we could help control was the food source. So our process in our company is to protect the organic materials from the molds. So in your home, when you're concerned, the first thing you must pay attention to would be water intrusions, whether that's a leaky faucet under a sink, or whether that's a water heater that bursts, or a roof or windows that fail. Any water intrusion is going to lead to mold growth over time. So the very first action, and this is not good for my company, but this is what we teach every day, is to make sure that you have dealt with any and all water intrusions quickly.
Hmm.
If you do so within 24 to 48 hours, you will mitigate the risk of mold growth. So this is a problem in dry climates like Arizona, where people feel that the water that was absorbed into their wall will evaporate because it's warm outside. It's just not true. In these energy efficient buildings I've been speaking of that we've been building for 40 years plus, that water stays in the ecosystem. It stays in the wall or in the concrete for great lengths of time,
Wow.
weeks or months. And that then leads to mold growth. So water is the one thing we can't control, but it's the one thing we can react the fastest to.
React the fastest to, and education is a big part, has to be a big part of your job then, isn't it?
It is. I love it. I didn't have a chance with my father's passing to go down the path of most likely becoming a teacher or professor. It's in our blood. I have two daughters who are both in education, and I've found a way in this business to be an educator. And I speak to a whole slew of different kinds of operations, primarily in the construction industry and in the real estate industry. So I'm routinely out at real estate brokerage offices talking to realtors, many of whom 10 years ago didn't think this was an issue, but now today all of them have been educated to the level that they both want to protect their clients and they want to protect their own personal properties, themselves and their families. So we are quickly making progress in teaching people to, one, accept that this is a true issue now that we build the way we build, and two, to take fast action, not to paint over the mold or to minimize its potential for damage. And it's not just damage to health, which is critical, but it's also damage to the building. Molds
Sure.
create far more damage than any other organism, including termites, to buildings.
Wow. I never would have thought that it would outdo the termites.
Oh, by by a factor of 10 at least in terms of real cost damages, molds in the tens of billions of dollars, and the termites have not reached that level.
My goodness. That really does give you an opportunity to get out there and teach, and it sounds like you're taking every advantage of that. And are they listening to you?
I'd say so. Again, I'm old enough to tell you that I started 12 years ago. I was a little thin-skinned, and I was really surprised at the pushback I got in my attempt to go out and simply help people understand what was going on, what was coming. And let me tell you, I don't know if we have time, but there have been a lot of studies about the health effects of mold, the most important one of which came out in March of last year. And for the first time in the history of the United States, a government study finally disclosed that mold is not to be considered just an allergen and an effective issue for that small portion of the population that it might affect, that if it is in fact a root cause of asthma. Asthma is a disease in which we have
Yes.
a ridiculous increase in its diagnosis. We just have, if you look at the chart, it's absolutely amazing how many kids are getting asthma. I wouldn't call it an epidemic, but it's systemic and it's serious. And now we're learning that the root cause of asthma at least finds part of its root cause in mold exposure. So there's no putting a lid on it now. It's become significant. As I mentioned to you, there's a disease, one in particular is called aspergillosis, and it is named after a mold, Aspergillus, of which there's many hundreds of species. Aspergillosis is an amazing disease. If I can just quickly quote a
Oh,
couple of
please.
numbers, I don't have them in front of me, so this is from memory. I'm going to round down. But we're all worried about Ebola, and appropriately, Ebola will kill something like 10,000 people this year. That's really terrible. Aspergillosis worldwide, there were over 12 million cases, and 450,000 people lost their lives
Oh,
to
my.
aspergillosis. It is a multiple of Ebola of what, 45, but no one has talked about it or wants to talk about it because currently there's no specific science to how to fight this issue. So the way to fight it is to prevent it. That's why my company name is Global Prevention Services. We can actually prevent the growth of mold in buildings and spaces and RVs and jets and any kind of space in which a human being would find themselves.
My goodness. Those are frightening
Yeah, look it
numbers.
up. I hope if your audience is, aspergillosis, just like it sounds. It's an amazing disease, first named, I think, by Mayo Clinic in 1999. So this information has been around, but it takes a long time to educate the medical community. It takes a long time to get to the public.
My. I just want to say, Michael, thank you very much for sharing that information. And we all need to pay attention to this. And if we see or hear of any mold in any area of our house, or no, we don't have to have the mold. We just need to pay attention when we see water. What about a dishwasher leak?
Happens all the time. It happens all the time. We work with a lot of home builders, and we have situations where 100 dishwashers are put in, and unfortunately, an apprentice may have made an error. Thinking of one situation in particular where over 80 homes became moldy from the leaks that occurred behind the dishwasher, which then gets between the cabinets and the wall, and it becomes very expensive and very costly. And it's also incredibly disruptive when you have to tear your kitchen apart.
Oh my
So
goodness, yes.
$10,000 would be a reasonable number. And people are shocked by these situations. And they show up when people start to smell or sense or actually get sick from what is called the colonizing mold, from these colonies that are created.
Okay. Thank you for giving us that bit of information, and it's our duty to be diligent and pay attention to this and call you when we are aware of mold or even suspect that maybe some water damage has happened that could lead to that. And so we'll have your contact information in the show notes later, Michael. Thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I mean, I also need to tell you, I came out of retirement to do this, and we do not charge our clients for inspections. And just about everyone else does. All of my competitor friends must charge because they are running businesses and need the revenue. But we do not charge, even if there's no job to be done. It's just a policy of our company, and we run all over the valley and outside of the valley. Obviously, if you take us outside of Maricopa County, there's going to be some sort of trip charge just to recover the cost of gas.
Sure.
But no, we want to help people fight this or avoid this.
Well, when you say you want to help people fight it by not charging them is a very generous way to help the people. So thank you for doing that. That's beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, here at Biz Stories Shared, we like to start every show with your favorite quote. Do you have a favorite quote? And how do you apply this to your everyday thinking?
It's a great question. Thank you. I do have a number that come to mind, but the one I seem to, other than the golden rule that I live, is a John F. Kennedy quote. And I use it regularly, especially when I'm teaching. And that's that things do not happen, things are made to happen. And I
Oh,
think I was 8 or 9 years old when he made that speech, and he's made many fantastic speeches. I'm sure everybody has their favorite Kennedy quote. But things do not happen, things are made to happen is something that I've done in all of my businesses and in my personal life and even of my athletics. It means to me to get more out of yourself, to not expect that things will just fall into place, that you really need to help them fall into place. And I think there's a lot of fateful things that have happened in my life, but I've made the most of each one of those by living by this rule.
that's wonderful. And so, do you have an example of how you've lived that rule?
Oh, a great example would be government liquidation and even this current business. Government liquidation was the first ever privatization of a government enterprise. We took over, two of us, two human beings, took over a department of the U.S. government. It's never been done before. It came out, it was fought by everybody, including the military. It was never supposed to happen. And through quiet, tenacious, I would hope intelligent processing, we did make that happen. And that company exists today. It started in 1996. It's been unbelievably successful. I retired from that company in 2002, and it was not supposed to happen. It was fought on every level. It was never supposed to become a reality. And I'm very proud to say that I was the leader who made that a reality. And again, fantastic people that joined me in that particular enterprise. It exists today. It's now 17 or 18 years old. It's returned over $1 billion to the U.S. Treasury.
Oh,
We have protected assets that were not being protected. We have stopped assets from going into the wrong hands. I'm just, again, extremely gratified to have been able to be a part of that program. I'm doing the same thing in the mold industry. I'm doing, with the help of a lot of great people, a complete paradigm shift in mold remediation, mold prevention. That has never been done before, and we believe that it's very important and very successful. And we have over 7,000 successful projects, so I think we've been validated.
oh, you've definitely been validated. That has to be just one of the most exciting times when you think of what your company did to in the Department of Defense? What was it? The excess?
There's all the excess assets that were not military. I mean, we weren't getting machine guns and missiles,
Right.
but everything else you can think of. And I won't give you much of a list, but there were over 4 million line items. This is
Oh,
something like 40 times the size of Walmart's current inventory by line item.
oh.
Everything from live cavalry horses to underwater communications cable to 300 types of oscilloscopes to boats and jets and NASA equipment and Navy SEAL wetsuits, and that's about 8 items. So you can imagine
Oh my
what 4
goodness.
million items
Uh,
feels like.
When you were in the middle of that, did you often just wonder how you were going to continue and bring that to success with that many items?
I can tell you that it's daunting and overwhelming, and that the people that were trying to win that contract were some of the best companies in America, the GE Capital, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and so many others. There were 334 companies that entered the competition. There was probably 100 that were capable, and proud to say that we were ultimately the winners. But I will also tell you that we never thought we would fail. That despite all the obstacles that are put up in a situation like that, we fought them all off, including people protesting that this was bad for small business. It was great for small business. People protesting that this was a national security issue. We cleaned up the security issue and made it healthier. So ultimately, it was a very patriotic program, still goes on today. And I think it was a real jewel in all of our backgrounds, but really never, ever concerned that we would succeed because the first handful of people that I brought on and then the people they brought on behind them were just absolutely world class.
Wow. So I was just thinking about what you said that you did not even allow the thought of failure to enter into your plans as you were going forward. Is that what you
Absolutely. No,
said?
and it was supposed to fail. It was supposed to not be awarded. There were so many very large contingencies that had to be met. There were tremendous financial burdens, which we were able to meet at the time, and many others also able to meet. There were incredibly restrictive covenants. We were held to the highest level of scrutiny, as you might imagine, dealing with all these government assets. And all of that came into play. We were not supposed to have our first sale of assets for more than a year, but we could not afford that. And we had our first sale of assets in 90 days.
Oh my.
And if your audience is interested, that was a lot of pizza and beer nights, figuring out how to do this business, how to meet all the criteria, how to conduct the sales, how to, of course, record and archive everything that had to be recorded and archived. And at the same time, build a business. We were all over the country, right? So we were in every major military base and every dermo. For those who were in the military who know about the Defense Realization Marketing Offices, these are the offices that supply all of the goods to all of the war fighters. So everything you can think of, I mean, every cot, every canteen, every single commissary or laundromat that was surplus came through our company and still does to this day.
How did you even begin to make an outline of how you were going to proceed?
Well, I'm proud of that. The partner, there was two of us, and my partner wanted nothing to do with it. He was willing to participate financially. He thought it was too much of a headache and too large a program. But I was not in the military, and I felt this was a tremendous way to do something that was truly patriotic. I remember my first 6 months of speeches to my staff. They thought I was out of it because I was always speaking to how incredible it's going to feel when we climb this mountain. And I can tell you that it was an incredible feeling when we started to truly perform. The contract called for the first proceeds to the government, U.S. Treasury, in 39th month. We had a check delivered in Columbus, Ohio on the 9th month, 30 months in advance.
Oh,
That first sale that we couldn't afford a year out was held on the 91st day in Stockton, California. We overperformed in every possible way to a tune of delivering hundreds of millions of dollars when the government thought it would get $9 million out of this contract. So it's a very patriotic, very fantastic situation. I just refused to even consider failure because this was a real breakthrough concept and a real opportunity to return to the taxpayer some value. because that value was not being returned. What we replaced was a program of waste and cost. Revenues that were generated from the sale of assets were all spent. There was never a net dollar since 1944. And starting in 1997, it's been nothing but positive from this particular portion. So I believe in privatization of certain government agencies because I believe the private sector can do a better, more efficient job. I would never say this about things like defense and the space program, but certain
Right.
aspects like surplus assets, marketing should not be in government hands. It should be in the private sector.
Well, that is just an amazing story, Michael. And thank you for doing that. So that helped all of us taxpayers then, didn't it?
We saved literally hundreds of millions of dollars in waste. It's a blip on the US budget, so I'm realistic about what it really means. But in my world, it was hundreds of millions of saved dollars in assets and returned cash to the Treasury. So, and I know they weren't expecting it because our very first check took 3.5 months to cash. They did not know what to do with the money.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
$186,000, which turned out to be a small amount of money, but at the time, we were very proud of returning that money to the Treasury, and they couldn't and wouldn't accept a wire transfer in 1997. So we literally sent a check, and it remained uncashed for many months. They didn't
Oh,
expect to see a dollar. They expected a greedy contractor who was not going to perform, and they got the opposite.
oh my goodness. Oh, that is such a remarkable story. Thank you for sharing that.
Glad to tell it.
Well, I can believe you should be glad to tell it from the highest mountain. Michael, I was going to ask you a question about some facets of your life that might have had a whisper of discontent and might have been like a failure, but I don't think, but from what you've shared, I don't know that you have any failures that were ever in your past.
It's funny. I'm in a networking group, and everyone speaks in there to how much they've learned from their failures. And I really haven't had the opportunity to learn from many failures because I couldn't afford or couldn't accept failure. But I will tell you that I was in international trade for 18 years, very successful, fantastic world and life. But we did have a failure in that, and it was a failure based on trust. We trusted a government just south of the United States in which we did some pretty fantastic work for their transportation department and system. And it was an 8-year project in which we were left holding the bag at the end of that time. And that was just a purely trust issue in which we left, a very significant amount of money on
Oh,
the table. So anyone listening just needs to understand that you have to always keep your eyes open. We learned that lesson. I'm still very trusting, not naive at all. I know that the risk can be
right.
there, but still determined to, it probably comes from some idealism in college, always attempting to trust people first. And there's people in the audience who absolutely would disagree with me. But for me, it's been a better way to live. It's been an easier night's sleep. And every once in a while, I am put
Right.
at risk, but it's more than offset by all the incredible wins we've had, and in helping people create fantastic opportunities, wealth, and good.
That's a very wonderful story to hear, particularly even though you maybe didn't do due diligence at the time, it hasn't shaken your
No,
trust.
stayed in the international business and did lots and lots of other fantastic projects, large and small. Met incredible people and had the opportunities to deal with high government officials and leaders of industry.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story. And the lessons that learned are more valuable than the actions that were taken or that maybe should have been taken. And so you did succeed. It wasn't a failure. You did succeed. Well, what I want to do now, Michael, is to go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about the time in your journey when you had an aha moment. I think you have aha moments all the time when you became aware of the new path that you wanted to travel. So, will you take us to a moment when you had a light bulb go off and through the steps that took you to success?
Wow. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when would you like this aha moment? I have had my share. Um, I've had many in my life, as I mentioned. I think I have to stay with the current company because this is the one that I think is even grander than government liquidation and all the good we did there. The reason this really sticks with me is because it comes from failure. We hired 5 subcontractors, all 5 failed. and they failed in such an amazing way. They failed in terms of their promises, they failed in terms of their deliverable, and then they charged us more and ultimately failed third-party testing as done by the International Airport and the FBI and the courthouse and these high-profile projects. And that was an aha moment for me. I decided I had to do something about that industry, at least here in Phoenix. And it turns out that our process and the path that led me on to our product line is needed nationwide and possibly worldwide. It is needed worldwide. I hope I'm the person to take it worldwide, although my energies are lessening as the years go by. But our ability to do these jobs with far less disruption and to provide a long-term protection, those are two unusual components of what we do in our value proposition. We also do it faster than the current protocols, and we do it for less money. So when you add all of this up, it really is, the aha was there's got to be a better way. And my personal quiet tenacity is the trait that I've learned through all my businesses brought me to the better way. And it led to the National Science Foundation testing a product line that I developed that allows us to literally agitate and capture molds and other microbials, by the way, not just mold, but molds the target, in a way that leaves surfaces in a pristine state, literally cleaner than when they were installed by the original builder, and then protects those surfaces long term so that you can have flood and water and still not have mold growth. So I don't want to belabor this, but the concept is quite simple, maybe elegant, like a Post-it note or a styrofoam cup. It has come out of a need. It wasn't necessarily the original design. And it's not yet known to enough people that they need to be aware of this and make themselves available to it. I can only tell you we're already have the gratification of thousands of clients, many of whom have said we saved their life, we've saved their marriage, we've saved their equity. Any one of those is pretty important to me.
I should say so. They're all very important, and how amazing that you created that technique to make a Post-it note to cover up
Yeah,
the
and
mold.
believe me, in the same way I mentioned that it was tough sledding in the early days of government liquidation because there was so much resistance. There's a tremendous amount of resistance 12 years ago to this, and still today. There's resistance from people who just don't believe the problem is a problem. I have many situations where those same people have now come to us with the problem, and their attitude has changed because once it strikes you, it really is. It's a diagnosis you don't want to get for your building or your property. And once you have it, you want to know a company like ours who can deal with it quickly, efficiently, give you a real result, and protect you long term. Not a few weeks, not a couple months, but years.
Who does come and inspects your building and says, "Oh, you've got mold. Call Michael." Who
Well,
does
there are
that
inspectors.
inspection?
A great deal of our business, probably 33% of our business, comes from the real estate community directly, where they're involved in either the listing or selling of a home, possibly even a close of escrow, and an inspector has come in and looked at all the systems of the home and is specifically looking for water stains, water intrusions, and the potential for mold. If they see or smell mold, that home is not going to close without someone taking swift action. And that's the problem. When you go the classic, it's called rip and tear method, and you start ripping homes apart, you don't get them ripped apart, cleaned up, and put back together in the inspection period. So now you're extending the escrows. People are going to start asking for lots of discounts to pay for this and or to cover the risk once they own the home down the road. And unfortunately, a tremendous amount of the operators in the industry don't provide the kinds of results that you truly need to feel completely safeguarded from this issue. So inspectors are the ones who very often find this in the real estate community. Then there's a whole level of environmental or indoor air quality professionals. And they're often called out once you look them up and find indoor air quality professionals. We do not do any of that. We do free inspections because we want to tell people if they have a problem or don't have a problem. Past that, we're not writing opinions and we're not charging anything. The reality is that you often don't need an inspector if you can smell or see it. You already know you have the problem. Take your money and spend it in rectifying the problem. We
Right.
never test. We don't even own a piece of test equipment. And again, something that I feel very strongly about, probably hear it in my voice. That is, the vast majority of again, my competitor friends have a revenue stream from testing, a revenue stream from inspection, a revenue stream from doing the remediation. And just think about them changing those baseball caps from one to the other to the other. Anyone who's been in business knows there's some terrible conflicts of interest there. If you call me in as the inspector and I am also going to make money off of you as the tester and as the remediator, pretty much always going to find mold because there's revenue stream behind that first decision.
Yes.
And if I'm the tester, I can absolutely test honestly or I can test dishonestly. And fortunately, the industry is getting much more honest over the last few years. But if I'm the remediator, then I want you to have a mold positive test. Now I can tell you need remediation. So you can see the layers of revenue that are being created by some operators out there. I call them the pirates because they're literally stealing. Hopefully you don't call or find one of those. The reality is that anybody who's doing remediation should want to be tested by a third party. So that validation is secure. If there was ever an issue, if there was ever a claim or a conflict or even a lawsuit, you'd be going to court independent of each other with the facts as you have them. If it's my own company doing the testing of my own work, not going to hold up very well in court.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you've cracked the code on how to let people find out about their need to have remediation.
Yes, remediation. And the other half of my business is prevention. We actually do pre-treatment with our Pure Space products that go into and onto new building materials so that, much like a termite pre-treatment, the goal is to limit the exposure to mold growth by having Pure Space in place. And it works beautifully.
Wow, that's a very good idea. And that was yours
Yeah, I named
also?
the company Global Prevention because the idea was to get proactive about this and to stop the damages to buildings and to people in advance of their occurring. I fought the battle in the 60s and 70s about preventive medicine. As an employer, I wanted health insurance that my employees could go have a physical, that my female employees could have maternal care. And I was certainly one of many business people around the country who was very happy and proud when medical health insurance became available that offered those services. This is exactly the same. Real estate shouldn't be built without microbial prevention, and transactions shouldn't occur without a microbial inspection. It's just completely unfair, Charlotte, for you to go out tomorrow and buy a property and have it not be disclosed, which happens too often, that there's water or mold, or possibly the owner and the realtor don't even know it. You move in, you and your
Right.
family get sick, and you've inherited this incredible mold issue that can be so terribly damaging.
Oh
Termites
my
are nothing.
goodness.
They're
Oh,
nothing
that's
compared to this. You have an average home in America and you have termites, it's $800 or $900, and termites are done and gone. You have a mold exposure of substance. You're not talking about that kind of money, and you're talking about far more damage than termites could ever do.
I'm so glad that you're out there to protect all of us, that's for sure. I'm going to ask you now if you would come to the present time and share your proudest entrepreneurial moment.
I'd be happy to. Again, you're straining my brain because I've had so many situations. When I was in the record and audio business, I was taken to the Orient many times by some of the largest companies in the business, people like Sony and Pioneer and JVC and Panasonic. And in those trips, I became known and then was asked to help source some items to send back to the Far East. And this is the 1970s and into the 80s. Very proud of the fact that with absolutely no information, but a great customer or two, was able to begin sourcing items from around the world that needed to be exported into Japan and Taiwan and Korea. And that included a run of 3 years in which we imported to those countries more than $100 million worth of American made automobiles. And yeah, it was a
Really?
fantastic time. I'm very proud of that because there were so many obstacles to that, all of which were were new. They were just new obstacles. There was no issue selling these cars out of the country. There was no issue importing them, but there were so many other issues relative to money, letters of credit, transportation, And we did that $100 million with 4 total employees. So I'm proud. I'm proud of that
No.
entrepreneurial. That period of years set up the rest of the companies that we've talked about today.
My goodness. With 4 employees.
Yeah, it was amazing. I don't know if you or your audience will remember Rain Man, but in the beginning of that movie with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise,
Yes.
Tom Cruise is on headphones, walking around his office, and he's making deals for, I think it's Lamborghinis, if my memory serves me, but he's trading cars. And I don't know when the movie came out, but it was pretty close to the time we were doing this. And my brother and I were both Tom Cruises in that sense. We deals buying hundreds of cars from dealers around the country and taking them to various ports, Brunswick, Georgia, LaPorte, Texas, Long Beach in California, putting them onto what are called railroad ships, roll-on, roll-off ships, and selling tens of millions of dollars worth of cars to our good friends in the Far East. Lots of logistics. So I started that by saying my brother and I, we were basically obviously the movers and shakers in terms of buying and selling the cars, but we had one gentleman in charge of all the logistics around the world, getting these cars from various places to the right places. And we had one young lady I stole from my banker at the time because she was an expert in letters of credit. So the four of us got it done every day.
Oh, how incredible. It's almost more than I can comprehend to even ask you the next question about.
Go right ahead.
Well, Michael, your expertise and dedication to improving systems certainly helps companies and all the people involved. And our listeners love to hear the stories like yours, how you are such a mover and shaker in this economy. Well, so would you tell us one thing that is really exciting you in your business right now?
Sure. Just one. We're growing. We have offices in Portland and Atlanta. We'll be opening up offices around the country. We'll probably be doing a franchise model so that other people can join in and give the same service, change people's lives, and be rewarded for it. It's exciting in that Pure Space as a product line, which we do not sell to people because it does have to be applied properly. It's very safe, by the way, completely non-toxic. But
Wow.
regardless, it does need to be available in all the cities of this country that we're not reaching today. We're totally willing to share the opportunity. Obviously, we make more money if we open our own office, but this particular company has never been about making money. I already retired once in 2002 and found it incredibly stifling. So the reality is, it's probably the most exciting thing is putting this out. Now we also have some people interested in putting our product on their products in an OEM basis. If you can imagine putting our product onto lumber, plywood, putting it onto clothing
Really?
for antimicrobial purposes. And it goes on and on. I mean, yeah, I can't keep it to one, so I'll just stop talking.
Wow. Where I come from, there is a plywood mill. So they probably would like to have your product on their plywood that they ship out all over
There
the
hasn't been a
country.
product like ours in the history of that industry and our industry. The difference between Pure Space and the rest is that our product goes on cell by cell. It agglomerates to the cell of the paper on the drywall or to a cell. I'm talking about a microscopic cell of carpet fiber.
Wow.
So it doesn't go on like a latex or an acrylic. It's not a film that would then peel off if it got wet underneath. So
Right.
it's impervious to water in that sense, but doesn't create a water vapor barrier. So it's the first product that you could actually put onto a piece of plywood or underlayment that will actually serve the purpose and not create other issues, because all those other products create other issues. Our product goes on either completely clear or we can put a tint. We use blue so that you can see it. So you have a choice of completely clear
Okay.
or the blue if that adds value to yourself or your client. So it's a very different situation, and again, it takes time to ignite these kinds of new arenas. But we've done it right. We have all the testing, and we have the National Science Foundation's endorsement. My visions are going to happen. They just may not happen as fast as I would like.
I'm sure that it isn't as fast as you like because you've probably got to get on to the next
I
project, huh?
have a number of things actually that I can't disclose, but one's an invention related to indoor air quality actually that I'm working with a professor. I'm very proud of this one. This will definitely save lives. There's no question about it.
Oh, well, good for you. Keep it up. You're
I
doing
appreciate that.
wonderful.
Thank you.
And Michael, what's the best business advice you have ever received?
Probably my father. A whole lot of what I would not take credit for, but I'm given credit, are lessons learned from my father, who, again, passed away far too young. He was an amazingly generous, gentle man who had a very strong backbone. So when things were wrong, even though he was gentle and seen as very calm, and which I like to believe I am, he was very strong in doing what was right. So for me, and talking just business, this is not true of all aspects of my life, but for me in business, there's right and wrong. And it's so simple for me. I do things that are right. I do not do the things that are wrong. And if it's gray, I wait for it to not be gray. And if it never turns, white or black, then it just stays gray and I don't do it. So I don't know that I have a quote for you, but basically it's have conviction to do what's right. And it really pays dividends. I'm not in this business to make lots of money and therefore things flow well to our company.
I'm sure that the fact that making money isn't your primary goal helps you so much in the way you develop your companies and your products because you can set that part aside and look at what the needs are and how you can help people. And I don't know you that well, but when you said about your father being gentle, you just appear to me as a very gentle person. I think you take that quality from
I
your
hope so.
dad.
I hope so, and thank you. I don't want your audience to read me wrong. If you can afford the path I'm taking now, then you should take it because it's very rewarding. But businesses do need to make money. They do need to be profitable. They serve no one if they fail. So I love to see
Sure.
people do the right thing and also provide services that allow them to make livings. But I can tell you that, these numbers are not made up. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars we do not recoup from the free inspection process. That's happening in Atlanta, it's
Right.
happening in Portland, it's happening here. We also turn away millions, and many people would like to have $1 million business. We turn away millions of dollars in testing. We take calls all day long for testing, environmental testing, and we have stayed with our convictions and we've refused that business by diverting it to companies we are not involved in, we do not own stock in. We haven't bought them a lunch. They haven't bought us a lunch. Completely arm's length. We divert that business to really good people who then, of course, think highly of us. So
Sure.
I want to be really clear that people understand that while we're always attempting to do the right thing, we're clear that you need revenues to grow and to fund your business and to do a lot of the pro bono work we do for clients who can't afford our service at all.
Right. Well, it sounds like the reciprocity really, really does pay off for you when you help the other businesses by diverting the
It
business to
does. I
them.
think it does.
Well, what is the vision of the future of your business, Michael?
Well, I hope the prevention piece takes hold in my lifetime so I can see it. I really hope that the laws change. There was someone speaking just like I'm speaking now 40, 50 years ago about termites and how damaging termites are and how you shouldn't inherit termites. And some of the same terminology I'm sure I'm saying was based on that world. Termites became such an issue that governments got involved and the Universal Building Code got involved, and it became code that you had to pre-treat for termites. I can tell you again, it's the third time. I don't speak this way very often. I haven't said this in probably 6 months, but termites don't hold a candle to the damages and the health issues that are related to the molds of the world. And the reality is that we need to start preventing mold exposure for humans and pets and plants by pre-treating all new buildings. It's inexpensive to do, and by demanding microbial inspections, possibly testing, which again would not affect my company, but I think it would be a fantastic new code and certainly a boon to the testing business. But people would now be buying their $100,000, $500,000, $1 million home knowing that they're not walking into a disaster.
That certainly would give people peace of mind,
It
wouldn't
definitely
it?
would. And it's just true of every city, every state in this country. People always think that this doesn't happen in the desert. One little fact, real fast, is from Claims Magazine, which is the trade paper of the insurance industry. The top 5 states for mold claims are Florida, which everybody would pick, California, Texas, and the last two nobody believes, but it's Arizona and Nevada. And it has nothing to do with moisture. There's moisture everywhere, even in the desert, especially in our homes. It has all to do with the energy efficiency craze and where the energy efficient homes were first built. And those 5 states led the way.
Well, that is very pertinent information for everybody to pay attention to. Well, Michael, can you share one of your personal habits that you strongly believe contributes to your success?
Well, it's going to sound so self-serving. I mean, I was thinking of all the things I love to do and lots of activities. There's no doubt it's charitable work. And I've been involved in a number of charities, none of which have I had any direct affiliation with. I was involved with Arthritis Foundation and many I could list, and I don't have arthritis. I do have, a couple of health issues, but I'm not involved in charities related to those health issues. And I get tremendous gratitude from being the chairman of the Leader Dogs Classic, which is an event we put on every year. It's our 29th year. This year will be at True North again, who does a fantastic job for us, is coming late April. I think it's April 27th. And I'm the chairman of that particular volunteer group. And we supply leader dogs at no charge beneficiaries who are deserving. And when I say no charge, it's approximately $44,000 to $45,000 to breed, groom, train, and ultimately pair the blind recipient with the leader dog who's made it through the system, because so many don't, and take them through a 28-day course at our Michigan campus. All no charge. Room, food, travel, all of it. We even supply very innovative GPS devices as part of the package that comes with the dog. So that's the answer to your question. I get more from that. I try to give it so much, and I consistently get more than I give, and I can't reach the point in which I give more than I get from that effort.
I had no idea that it would cost that much for a leader dog, and that there was such an organization as yours that supplies
Well,
those
I'm
for
going to give a shout
people.
out to Nestle Purina and Scottsdale Insurance and Isogenics, and the list is too long. I'm going to miss them all the rest, but some pretty fantastic world-class sponsors who have been with us for years and are very generous. It does cost that much. It's an expensive process. You can imagine we're changing these people's lives. When they leave and go home with their new partner, their lives are in our hands. We have to make sure that they're working as a team. And the gratitude, again, that we get from watching these people's lives change. Most of them don't have freedom. They don't have independence. They don't have a lot of self-worth in some cases. And then you pair them with these incredible
Sure.
dogs who are the true heroes, and everything changes. These people they blossom is probably a good word for it. I mean, we've seen people who have tremendous talent, who shelve that talent, put it away, who then come back into the real world with that talent because of the dog. So yes, $45,000. We are a best charity nationwide. We are given all kinds of accolades and awards for the work that is done. And again, if you're not, I mean, I have nobody blind in my life, and although I now have a lot of blind friends because of my work with this particular organization, I love them all. I mean, how could you not support a charity that's taking care of kids? I was just in a golf tournament for the Cancer Network, and they did Children's Cancer Network, and they did a tremendous job. And I have no problem giving to other charities, although I will tell you my focus truly is on the Leader Dog Classic for Leader Dogs for the Blind.
I can see why that would be a wonderful choice, and thank you for working with them so diligently and for contributing to the other ones. But the leader dog has to be so rewarding. Thank you for your
Well,
work with
thank you.
that. Michael, do you have an internet resource that helps you with your efficiency?
I don't think that I do. I hope I understand the question completely.
Well, I was going to add like Evernote or an app that you use to keep track of all of your activities.
Well, that's hard to say. I use so many things. I mean, I am a Apple nut. I was an Apple Macintosh guy way back. Had IBMs in most
Okay.
of my businesses, of course, except for the marketing departments. But iPad, iPhone, Outlook keep me very connected. I had to turn everything off for this call because we would have been alarmed 3 or 4 times. I was alarmed that I should be contacting you and getting on with you. I mean, my efficiency is pretty much based on whether the iPad, iPhone, and Outlook are all working correctly. And when they don't, I I have a decent memory, but it's not good enough to remember everything I'm supposed to do. We're in the construction business, so we use a number of different pieces of software and apps for estimating and the like. But I'm just going to go with the calendar on iPad and iPhone. I mean, I live and die with that.
Well, that makes sense. So thank you for sharing those. And listeners, we are going to have the sites that Michael has mentioned on the show notes of today's episode that you can find on bizstorieshared.com, Michael Himelfarb. Now, would you describe for us who are perfect referrals for your business? Those people that the listeners know who might benefit from doing business with you.
Great question. One of the interesting things about our business is we truly intersect with every existing building and every building to be built. So we're dealing with new builders. We're dealing with property managers who already have buildings. We're dealing with the real estate communities I've mentioned. Those property managers, by the way, are commercial and residential. We have some very large clients who have millions of square feet commercially. We have another client who has 950 homes. So our perfect referral is anyone who thinks they have this issue or is concerned about having this issue. We treat every single customer. I know this sounds pompous, but it's the truth. If you have a $200 problem in a laundry room or you have a $200,000 problem in a mansion, both clients are getting our full attention and our red carpet treatment. We have found so often that some of our smallest jobs, smallest clients have led to some of our largest relationships. So the reality is that I can't pinpoint for you or your audience our perfect referral. Obviously, we all want the super large company that has tremendous amounts of square footage and or issues. I can make a personal plea that I really am concerned that we're not doing enough educational facilities because they have a lot of mold problems. And there have been many here in Phoenix, Arizona, where we could have been a great help, but our innovation was not seen as viable at the time, so they went the other route and paid a dear price and didn't get the results. And the second area, it's even part of my mission statement, is the medical field. We want to help hospitals, clinics, and doctors, dentists, and chiropractor offices be clean and safe and healthy for all involved, including their clients. And again, these places are maintained just about every day, meaning they're being mopped and all surfaces are wiped down with some sort of water and detergent. And all of that water evaporates into the building and creates the mold issues that we deal with. So my perfect client is a very broad range of people, but probably a focus on education and medical.
Anybody that uses water.
Yeah, if you're maintaining every day and you're not drying, which these people don't do, they mop these floors. And you just remember the janitor with a mop going up and down every classroom.
Sure.
That's still happening today. And all of that water is now going into energy efficient buildings that trap them. So you trap the water, you create an issue.
Well, Michael, if you could recommend just one book to our listeners, what would it be?
That's impossible. Let me think about that. I mean, let me give that 1 second of thought because there's 15 titles came into my brain. Because there's business books and there's self-help books and there's just so many to one book. I really like the 4-hour work week. I'm not presenting that it's factual or it's possible, but it is a business self-help book and it does teach some lessons that are worthwhile. So I'm going to go with the 4-hour work week.
Okay. And I can't believe that you only work 4 hours, but your brain is going all the time. I know.
I think you'd be surprised. I probably only truly work 4 hours a week. I have so much fun at the rest of it. It's not work.
Good. Well, that's a really great attitude that having fun does prevent it from being drudgery work. And it's because you give so much that it isn't
Well,
work
this
to
is going to
you.
sound crazy to those who golf, but I retired and played something like 60 rounds of golf in 90 days. 60 rounds of golf would have easily been 5 years of golf. I was going crazy from that golf and from my from my experience on the golf course and the nature of the people I was golfing with and what made up their day. It just was crazy. That was work.
That was work, huh? Oh, dear. Well, Michael, I truly have enjoyed listening to your journey and the stories that you shared. And it was such a good education for all of us. The listeners are really going to benefit from the stories that you shared. And so would you please share one more time how we can get in touch with you and any other resources that you want us to have, and then we'll say goodbye.
Charlotte, thank you. I want to thank you for the time you spent with me. Great questions. You caught me on a couple of them, but I appreciate the thought process. I'm easy to get in touch with. The company is Global Prevention Services. We do have the trademark on GPS, so that's what most people who know us call us. And we're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. The phone number here is 480-951-3600. Proud of our domain. I've been proud of a lot of things today, and I apologize for rambling, but there is a lot to download. Our domain is nomold.com. That's NOMOLD.com. I attempted to buy mold.com. It turns out to be owned by Bill Gates at the time, and it was not for sale. And when I ran into that obstacle with his business manager, I started looking and came up and was able to purchase nomold.com, which is even more important than mold.com. So we're easy to contact. If you can remember nomold.com, that's us.
I'd say that it was meant to be that you got nomold.com, because that truly is what you're
I think
about,
so. I
isn't
mean,
it?
we're late to the game. We came in 50 years after the industry started, but I was able to obtain nomold.com, and it is a domain that is quite valuable inside of our industry, at least.
Across the street from me, I saw a license plate that had MLD, and I thought of you that because that was so close to the word mold. I thought, oh, you should have a license plate that says no mold.
Well, I have to tell you, Charlotte, we don't ID any of our vehicles because we deal with such a high-end clientele. I can't give you the names of the people, but they're the best property management companies, the best general contractors. Some of these are billion-dollar companies, and they don't want us driving up with anything on our truck or vehicle that says mold. So we wouldn't, as much as I'd love to have that, we wouldn't do it because we respect and honor their requests.
Very gracious of you, and no wonder you are trusted so out there in the world. And I just want to say thank you for your generosity of your time and expertise in sharing your experiences. Okay, listeners, you can find the links to this resource and everything that we have been chatting about in today's episode by going to bizstorieshared.com. Michael Himelfarb. Goodbye, Michael, and thank you so much for being my guest
Charlotte,
today.
again, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for giving me this exposure. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Give the storyteller some love. Go to bizstorieshared.com, click on the iTunes button, and give a 5-star review. Thanks.